Welcome back to the Gleam fishing channel. You'll see today the weather's not ideal, quite heavy rain outside, so you might hear a bit of rain in the background. This one I thought I might talk about something that happened to me when I was at sea. You might notice, like during the interviews with other fishermen, that we ask them, anything interesting or scary, happened during your career at sea, anything the viewers might like, just so you get a bit of you get to enjoy some of the cool and some of the scary things that do happen in the real world. When you've sort of earning a crust out on the briny or out on the ocean. So this one largely is an event that happened to me. So for those of you that know me, I've been doing maritime safety and health and safety now since probably think it's about 22 years, since about 2004, 2003, something of that nature. And people often say, well, how do you go from being largely a hard-ass commercial fisherman out there taking shortcuts, taking risks and gambling and all that sort of thing, to promoting health, safety and well-being, because it is quite a turnaround. And really, look, there's a series of things, but I think largely what drives me now to help with maritime health and safety is, I've seen a lot of injured people. I've seen a lot of people that lost their lives at sea, never came home. A lot of people have had serious frights, and I was one of those. So I did have one particular event at sea that I thought I'll give you a bit of a run through, and ultimately that led to me spending a lifetime of trying to make sure that mariners and those that work at sea come home to their loved ones. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy. It's something that not everyone will talk about in the industry, like a lot of people, admitting their mistakes and their failures and what went well and what didn't go so well. There's a fear of reprisals and all those sorts of things. But, if we don't talk about what goes wrong and if we don't think about what goes wrong, we're never going to get it right. So hopefully, someone might learn from some of the mistakes that I made, and it keeps them safe so they can go home to their loved ones. So yeah, so here we go. I guess this particular event, and a lot of you have heard me talk about the vessel next door, actually. So the vessel next door is the Kathleen G, built by my grandfather Jack Gard, named after my grandmother Kathleen Gwen, hence the Kathleen G. Launched in '95 when I was in my 20s. Largest capacity boat that the Guards have actually had. We're predominantly an inshore shellfish and inshore fishing company and family. Then all of a sudden I was, given $1 million vessel and told to go Hoki fishing and work in the Cook Strait. And look, as you know, your weather in the Cook Strait can be pretty gnarly. So what happened in this particular occasion is we were fishing for Hoki, which is a mid-water fishery, normally between the months of, start about July. Sometimes in June you might get some early runs of fish, but sort of July, August, September is normally the Hoki season in the Cook Strait, where they aggregate, right? So they're just easier to catch because they're aggregated during the season, and that means they're more accessible, they're thicker and easier to catch, even for smaller boats like the Kathleen, because the Kathleen is a very small Hoki boat in the day. So, and I think it was about 96, and there was probably up to about 20 smaller inshore boats catching Hoki, and we're based out of Picton. So, some of our trips, the likes of the Kathleen, would hold about 25 up to 30 tonne back in the day when it was just bulk fish. You just poured the fish into the hold with a bit of ice. And look, we could do, port to port in sort of 10 to 12 hours if you got it right with 25 tonne of fish. So when it's spawning, when it's there, which was pretty cool. And you do that over a period of a couple of months. So I remember on this particular trip, season was going well, we were catching fish, and we used to fish with a couple sister ships. So for those of you that have seen the, for example, the Jack Gard, Life of Jack Gard module, you'll see that I talk about the three sisters. So there's the first, the Pursuit, built by my grandfather, then there was the Lady Anna, and then the Kathleen. So three sisters, similar design, and what we had to do was fish together during our time in the Cook Strait during the Hoki season, because 3 boats would make a couple truckloads. It was just more efficient, so we'd normally fish together. So, and I remember we used to play a little bit of Russian roulette with the weather. So you'd know the weather was coming, but based on the fact that you could actually go out and get a load in 10 to 12 hours meant that you could whip out there, get your load of fish, and come in and beat the weather. So it was a calculated risk and something that we were pretty good at doing because we were pretty sharp with the weather. So this particular occasion, all sort of 3 of our boats and others left. We knew there was a southerly coming. Big southerly storm. I think the forecast was 40 or 50 or something of that nature, which you don't want to get caught in. But we knew we had time, because normally the southerly would come on the tide, the turn of the tide when the tide started to flood, or at the end of the flood tide. And, the plan was you'd leave Picton, head down Tory Channel, head out, through the gap there, and head about, I think it's 6 to 8 to 10 miles, just slightly to the southeast into the canyons there, into deep water, and that's where the Hoki largely were. And one tow with your mid-water net, and largely you're in when they're that thick. So one tow, 20-25 tonnes. Some of those tows might be minutes long, some of them might be half an hour long, but that's how prolific the Hoki are in the season. So we headed out. We knew the weather was going to be rubbish. All 3 of the boats, the 3 sisters, we all set away at the same time, towing into the tide, and it was towards the end of the tide, so we knew that the Hoki was up the end of the canyon, which we call Easy Street, and it was just, throw the gear over, get it down or close to the bottom, tow for 5-10 minutes. You've got your old cod end, your net monitor, you see the fish going in, you have a bit of, go, okay, we reckon we've got enough. You haul, you get the fish aboard. We used to be able to get on the Kathleen about an hour 45. We could get an hour and a half. We could get something like 25-30 tonne on board. Just with splitting, doing 3-4 tonne lifts. So quite a methodical process, and worked really, really well. So we knew our times. We knew what we could and couldn't do. On this particular occasion, we all set away, and the weather hit, and thought, oh, that's a bit early. So that's a bit gnarly. And I remember I was towing, so I started taking marks, and I took about 7 minutes, what we call 7 minutes worth of marks. So basically it's how long you see things on your net monitor potentially going into the net. And the thicker it is, the less minutes you take. So you're physically towing, and you might get 20 tonne in 2 minutes, or it might be 30 minutes. So it's a bit of an estimate, but you can look at the colour and the thickness of the marks. Like if it's a deep blood red, then they're thicker, so you take less minutes. And this particular trip, I'd gone home, so we'd had a couple hard weeks, and I'd gone home just for 24 hours while the boat was unloaded. The crew stayed behind to unload the boat, get fuel and ices ready for the next trip. So I'd gone and come back, and jumped on board, and we sailed thinking, oh no, everything's all the same. Nothing's changed at all. We'll just go fishing, get another load. Hopefully we beat the weather, and Bob's your uncle. So all things were going well to plan. I remember we all shot away, and I remember the Pursuit and Lady Anna picked up. I think they shot just before me, and they had their fish, they had 18, 20 odd tonne, whatever they needed. So they turned around. Remember, the wind had started, the southerly had started. So they turned around and put the wind on their stern, and then just headed towards Tory Channel, just splitting, slowly. Basically what happens is you've got a cod end on the end of your net, and what you do is you've got a rope to that and to the winch on the boat, and you just pull that rope, and you grab 3 or 4 tonne, lift it on the stern, then you let the cod end back again, and then you're steaming forward, and then another 3 or 4 tonne go in, you pull it on board. So it's sort of like that, largely just taking bites out of the net. So they got their fish, and off they headed, and I thought, oh, we bit of haul now. We've taken about 7 minutes worth of marks. Reckon we've got fish, because the marks look pretty good. And then I remember we were hauling away, so got about 1,000 metres of wire out going down to the net, quite a bit. And I remember thinking, this is a bit odd. The boat feels like she's almost stuck on the bottom. She's struggling. Meanwhile, the wind is building up. We were probably up to 25-30 knots southerly at that stage, which wasn't an issue because we had the wind on our stern. Nothing too concerning there. And then started hauling, where I guess that becoming, the net was sort of under the boat, and of course the weight was more of a direct pull, so the net was coming up under the boat. And it was bizarre. I remember thinking, I don't know what's going on, but it's like we're stuck on the bottom because the boat's straining and we're going backwards. And I thought, well, bloody hell, we're going backwards. It's either we're hooked on the bottom, we've hooked a bit of debris, or I don't know what it is, but it's really struggling. So what I had to do was haul about 200 metres of wire, and then go in and put the hammer to the dash, let the boat start going forward to get a momentum so the gear came out from under the stern, to reduce the risk of propeller fouling and all that stuff. And I had to do this 5 or 6 times, and I thought, this is really weird. Never experienced it quite like this before. And of course, the weather was getting worse. Water starting to come on deck, lots of spray, probably up to about 30 knots at this stage. And I just remember thinking, this is just bizarre. I don't know what's going on. And then the net was coming close to the surface, and I still remember looking back and seeing, and it was largely, on dark, and I looked back and I could see through the deck lights on the boat the most colossal bag of fish you've ever seen, longer than the vessel. I don't know what the weight was, but it was a lot. So the Kathleen, is a 54-ton, weight vessel. The bag of fish was larger than that. And I just thought, how can this be? Because back in the day, they don't do it now. They have really good, smart, modern electronics. But back in the day, some of us would run like holes in the net. You're called windows, and you could basically, they were like a door in the net, and you would open whatever door that you sort of needed. So we had a door set at about 25 tons. So what that meant, if you were down, your net was on the bottom and you were catching really, really well. So there's no wastage. There's no mortality. So everything's all good. You get 25 ton in the net, and then the rest would just go through the net. So it's like basically a door or a big net or big hole or window. And we ran those for the whole season, and they worked incredibly well. It was just routine, 25 ton, 25 ton, 25 ton, yawn, boring, same old, not a problem. Absolutely faultless system, nice and safe. And then here I was with this monstrosity of a bag. And I still remember looking around to the crew and saying, I don't know what's happened here, but something's changed. Is there something that somebody wants to tell me? Because I don't understand how we've got a bag of fish of this size. And to be fair, I was young. I was in my 20s, and I got pretty angry. I was a little bit of a hot-headed skipper. And I thought, well, we've got this fish now. We've got to get it aboard. We're going to have to make the most of it. We've got to get it on board. So we continued. So we started the splitting process, right? And this thing was a big bag of fish. Meanwhile, the southerly was increasing and increasing and increasing. But largely, you were just in the zone. Like, we were splitting this, 3 ton, 3 ton. I had boys down the freezer pushing the fish out, because just pouring the fish down. Had, spreading a bit of ice between the layers of fish. So guy down the hold, and a couple crew at the stern working, the splitting mechanism, get the net aboard, pull the string, boom, 3 or 4 ton of fish, then let it back, and then we're steaming ahead, so another 3 or 4 ton come in, so then you grab another bite, 3 or 4 ton. So that was going on, happened for about an hour, and I still remember the weather was adverse at that stage, but I was in the flow, almost in a bit of a trance. The focus was on, and this is why a lot of boats have been lost, right? You're in the flow. I don't know whether it's the greed or the hunger or the hunter-gatherer takes over, but you just want that fish aboard because, it's like cod ends of money. And all things, your peripherals are gone, and you're not present. You are just in the process, not present to the time. And I actually remember one of my crew. My crew, a very experienced crew, and one of them was let's just say very distressed. Very distressed, and I'd never seen this crew really distressed, and I was standing at the back of the wheelhouse working the winches and the controls and doing the navigating. So I'm doing that, and they're at the back doing their bit, and got the guy in the hold. The guy came up from the fish hold, and he vomited, and I thought, that's unusual. What's wrong with you? Over the side, and I went, oh, that's odd. And then one of my crew was really distressed, and I guess I became a bit present. I looked at him and said, what's up with you guys? What's going on here? And I was still a little bit, I guess, a bit frustrated, surprised, and furious that we got this big bag, and we're in this situation that we were struggling to control through no fault of my own, that I thought at that time. And then the crew said to me, we're going. Look at this. The weather is adverse. The boat's sinking. There's water everywhere. What the hell are we doing? And I sort of snapped back at him, and then I guess I sort of came to. I sort of became present and thought. I looked around, did a bit of an assessment, looked at the stern, looked at the situation, looked at the weather, and realised he was absolutely right. I was standing there at the back of the wheelhouse with water lapping at the top of my gumboots. The stern deck was largely underwater, and I was still pulling fish aboard. So we had a big aluminium truck deck on the back of the vessel that held 6 tonne. And I was bringing like 3 tonne splits aboard. So, and then fish was flowing into the fish hold. So it was quite a seamless process. But then I realised that hey, the fish hold was actually full, and I was still wanting to pull fish on board. There was a shitload of water on board. The bilge alarms were starting to go, so there's obviously water getting in, and we had a problem. Because after a while, if you're lucky, your Hoki, if you get it aboard, it'll float, and that's not a problem, but after a while, it'll sink. And that's when it becomes a bit more of an issue because, it sinks, and what happens, it pulls the boat down. So all of these factors, so I had a bit of a look, and I thought, oh yeah, we're in the shit here, without a doubt. I literally thought that. And I said to the boys, get out of the fish hold, batten down. We need to think about this carefully. We need to get some water off the deck because, she had a lot of water on her. And I said, look, boys, shut everything down, open the scuppers, make sure everything's lashed. We're going to have to figure out a way to maybe, get some of the weight off the stern of the boat. We might have to let some of this fish go, which, of course, I absolutely did not want to do. And I thought, well, what I'm going to have to do is get in the wheelhouse, put the hammer to the dash, with everything secure, and just largely hope and pray that the water washed off the deck, and the old Kathleen shook it off, and she'd pop up again, and then we'd have a bit of freeboard, a bit of buoyancy, and a bit of time to deal with the bag of fish that we actually needed. Because I sort of realised that if I took one more split, one more 3 or 4 tonne aboard, she'd probably roll over. And without a doubt, I know to this day that she would have. So I'm just fortunate that I sort of came to at that time. So the boys were all a bit freaked out. I went into the wheelhouse, up onto the Kathleen, put the hammer to the dash. She had a V1271, about 400 horsepower, a lot of power on a small boat, and I put the hammer to the dash. And I actually sort of remember reminiscing a bit. I had a little wee medicine bottle of holy water that was used to christen the boat in 95, sitting by the compass. That stayed there for about a decade until it evaporated. I had a little sign in the front of the wheelhouse that said, "O Lord, thy ocean is so big and thy boat is so small." I'm not a religious person, but I remember looking at those and thinking, shit, this actually could be it. This could be it. This could be how it all ends. 200 years of fishing in the guard. I mean, in the New Zealand fishing industry, I'm the last guard, working a jack guard boat, and this could be it. I could be the one that buggers it all up here. So I rang my wife. So it was pitch black, good 50 a southerly. Things were grim. I rang. Hindsight's wonderful, right? So I there's a lot of other things I could have done, but I didn't. I rang my wife to say goodbye. So. And she still talks about it. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning, about July-ish, freezing cold, gale of southerly. And I just rang to say, sorry, I've got it wrong. I didn't even have the intelligence to tell her where we are. She knew I was in the Cook Strait, but I just, said I love you. See you later. Now, and then I sort of hung up. And I actually just thought a bit about my grandfather and everything I'd learnt, and the fact that his boats were the best in the world. And then I guess I snapped to it and thought, no, bugger this, we're gonna fight. If we're gonna go down, we're gonna fight, and we're gonna bloody fight hard. So your next decision's got to be a smart decision. She'd come up a bit because we had the hammer to the dash. A bit of water had flushed off the deck, so that was good. That was a positive sign. But we still had a large weight hanging over the stern with the rest of the fish. that we needed to deal with. So I got the boys in the wheelhouse, and they were pretty mortified at that stage. They were grabbing life jackets and doing all those sorts of things. And I said to the boys, right, what we're going to do is I need one of you with the grapple, and what we're going to do is take one more bite. So at this stage, we still had the net hanging over the stern, and it was full of fish. We couldn't reach the back of the net to pull the cod end string to open it to let the fish go. So to do that, we had to pull the fish, the 3 or 4 ton round, to the back of the boat, so the boys could reach the string, pop it, then we'd let the net go, and then we'd be able to get rid of the fish. But the very process of bringing that 3 or 4 ton bag round to the side of one side of the stern leans the boat. And she was reasonably well loaded, and I thought that could be enough to lose her. So I said to the guys, we got one chance at this. So the guy that throws the grapple at the rope on the cod end needs to have the throw of his life, because I can't get, if I bring that 3 or 4 ton, that cod end to the transom of the stern, that may be what it takes to roll us over. So, we had life jacket, we had everything sort of ready to go at that stage, and it was well planned out. And to be perfectly honest, we did it. You talk about your backside puckering, toes curled up in the gumboots, and it was sort of at that stage, it was you're a bit defeated. You're sort of waiting for the inevitable, but you bloody give it your best go, because we're fishermen and that's what you do. And we had a crack, and sure enough, whether it was fate or whatever, the crew did the perfect grab, got the cod end string, popped it. We let, without the vessel heeling. It was probably the best throw, the best gaff job I've ever seen in my entire time fishing. No doubt adrenaline was pumping. Someone was looking after us, and we managed to let the trawl back and get the weight off the stern of the boat. So that was cool. We're pretty damn happy. We got the net on board on a roller, and there's a few shaky crew and a few heart moments. We never really talked about it. It was sort of the great unsaid, and I've never had this conversation with those crew, and those crew will know who they were, because they were there and they were on board. And largely we never really talked about it until we never talked about how close it was. I never talked to them about how necessarily I thought how close it was, because I didn't want to scare them, right? The skipper's got to be hard, and they've got to have comfort, security and safety and all of that BS. But when we got in, I said to the boys, I says, why did we get a bag of fish that large? I don't understand. When we've had a window, in that net forever and a day, we've had it that way for several years. There's never been an issue. What happened? I need to know. So we pulled the net off, and what we found was that the window had been fixed. It had been sewn up, so it had been closed. And then, of course, automatically, remember, I'd been home that trip. So, and then I looked to the boys and I said, who did this? And it was actually a new crew, it was actually a cadet, his first trip, young boy. And he was being proactive. So what you do at the end of each trip is roll the net off the roller, looking for holes, and you mend them. It's ongoing maintenance. And of course, what he'd done is found this big hole and thought, I'll help out here. This is not good. Look how great I am. I found this big hole in the net, and he sewed it up. So, that reflects on us, poor training. He'd never seen the net, first trip, etc., etc. And he sewed the window up. And hence, that's how we ended up with that huge bag of fish that nearly took the Kathleen G and nearly took our life. So I sort of spoke. I got home, bit somber. We were a bit shaken. And of course, as I said, it was 50 knots of southerly at that stage. When a good southerly goes through the straits, it's a week normally, a few days. So we went home, and there's some awkward silence with my wife, and, she was obviously upset, and my wife's, a reasonably good, staunch Christian, and I sort of said to her, how was it for you? Sorry, because I didn't ring her back. That was something she reminds me. I never rung her to say I'm all good. We got back in about 5 o'clock in the morning, gale of southerly, everything was all good. And of course I didn't ring her because I thought, she'll be asleep. I told her at 1 o'clock in the morning, goodbye. 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to ring her again because she'll get frustrated, because here I am, ring her at 1 to say, goodbye, and then at 5 o'clock I'm just disturbing her sleep. But she actually, in a recent conversation, I asked her what was it like for her, and she said it was horrifying. She was awake for several hours praying, and then about 5 o'clock, which of course I've only known this recently in the last few months, and about 5 o'clock, about when we hit the wharf safe and secure, she said she had a feeling of calm come over her, and she wasn't sure whether I was gone or whether I was okay, but she said she had a feeling of calm, and she got a few hours sleep. So clearly, fortunately, the feeling of calm was, call it karma or whatever, was we were next to the wharf, and we were all good. So, and you say that story, and people are horrified and think that that's terrible, etc., etc. What do you reminisce about it? What are your thoughts? And I look back at it and I think, well, that was the beginning of my time being involved in health and safety, and hopefully helped many people in the maritime sector, and will going forward, to not make those silly mistakes and do the risk assessments and come home to their loved ones. I guess one of the things that I'm proudest of that horrendous time is I still got my load of fish. So, and as bizarre as it is, nearly cost us our life, but we got a load of fish. We got to stand on the hatch and push it closed, and the boys made money. And I guess that's just the human nature, right? You got the greed and the desire to feed the people, and that passion and that drive nearly took my life and 3 or 4 others. But, I still smile when I think we got our load of fish. So, yeah, I guess that explains what a sort of a weird individual I am, and maybe what drives people in the primary industries to go out there and provide and do their best every single day. Farmers and fishermen get up before daylight, get in the milking shed, get in the farm, get on the fishing boat, and do their best to feed the people. So yeah, it was a learning experience, and one I won't forget in a hurry. Certainly one that my wife will never let me forget. So don't make those mistakes, and health and safety is a priority, no matter what industry you're in. So yeah, thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and please subscribe. Thank you, and have a safe day.